Okay, so I'm back with another video. If you are new to my channel, welcome. If you're not new, welcome back. My name is Imani. I'm a licensed professional counselor, and the whole point of this channel is really just to talk about things related to mental health. So if you've seen some of my other videos, you know I've done like review videos for people who are interested in becoming counselors, who might be taking the licensure exam. And I've done like a few other things talking about like intrusive thoughts, how to cope with like anxiety, and how to just deal with different challenges that we might face as we're going through this little journey in our life. So in today's video, what I'm gonna focus on is the different types of licensure exams, and somebody had a pretty good idea of going over types of questions that you might see on the exam, so I'm gonna do that too. So this video is definitely more geared for people who are interested in becoming counselors and who might be preparing to take the licensure exam. So I'm gonna start by just going over the differences between the two types of licensing exams. So there's the NCE and the NCMHCE, something like that. It's the National Counselor's Exam and the National Clinical Mental Health Counselor's Exam. And the biggest difference is how these two tests are formatted, but what you're gonna wanna know is which test your state requires. So I'm licensed in the state of Ohio. Ohio takes the NCE, but like I mentioned in one of my other videos, I'm working on being dually licensed, and I'm working on getting licensed in California. California does not take the NCE, so I'm preparing to take the other licensing exam. So I might do some like review videos for that too, just because the formats of the exams are pretty different. But that'll be for another time. So for now, I'm gonna go over the main differences. So to make sure I don't miss anything, I'm gonna look at a little chart that made it kind of helpful for me to see the differences. So I'll start with the NCE. So the NCE is 200 questions, 160 of them are graded and 40 of them are like trial questions for future exams. And the questions all fall under certain domains or subjects, if you want to call them something different. So there's professional practice and ethics, intake assessment and diagnosis, areas of clinical focus, treatment planning, counseling skills and interventions, and core counseling attributes. So each of these sections kind of have a different amount of questions, so they're weighted differently. So the biggest parts of the NCE are the counseling skills and interventions and the areas of clinical focus. So those make up about 59% of your overall score. Another 24% comes from the professional practice and ethics and intake assessment and diagnosis. Both of those are weighted around 12%. And then the smaller portions are treatment planning, which is 9%, and core counseling attributes, which is 8%. So for me, that was kind of helpful knowing that, because it helped me prioritize what I was going to study and what I wasn't going to study. So knowing the major theorists of like human development or just counseling theories overall, whether it's family counseling, career counseling, individual counseling, those are very important to know. Things that I found a little bit less important was like research and statistics, which was not my strength in school anyway. So I really did not study that as much as I maybe could have. But it was fine because I passed, because I put so much focus into the other areas that one section of the test wasn't gonna make me pass or fail. So kind of knowing how things are weighted, knowing what your strengths are, and really making sure that you're boosting your strengths going into the test so that way you have the best chance of passing. What I really found for the NCE is that it is very much like textbook knowledge based. It's not so much like clinical application. And that's one of the really big differences between these two tests. So the other exam, the NCMCHE, National Clinical Mental Health Counselor's Examination, from what I've seen so far, it's not structured like the NCE. So like how I said, the NCE is like textbook knowledge based. The other test is more clinical applications. So the format of this test is case studies. So they recently updated the format this year, 2022. So there are 11 case studies that are, and I'm gonna read from the NBCC website, which kind of does a really good job of describing this test. So there are 11 case studies designed to replicate the actual work of a clinical mental health counselor, working with the client over time through intake and clinical sessions. The case studies are designed to capture an examinee's ability to identify, analyze, diagnose, develop, and implement plans for treatment of clinical concerns. Each case study includes one narrative and 13 multiple choice questions. So that's the biggest difference of the two tests, I think, because the NCE, there might have been a few questions that had like a scenario, but they weren't case studies where you were going through the whole counseling process. Some other differences, the number of questions for the NCMCHE, there's 143 questions, and I guess it's broken up into 3 parts. So there's the intake, so being able to provide or gather introductory client information, identify presenting concerns, and make an accurate diagnosis. The second part is the clinical session, where the counselor works with the client on their presenting concerns using evidence-based approaches. And the third part is another clinical session, where the counselor continues the work from section 2. And another change that I guess was made to the NCMHCE is that the diagnosis for the client is provided at the beginning of each case study, and I guess it wasn't provided in previous years. So as the test taker, you're going to be asked to evaluate how the clinician came to make that diagnosis. And you might be asked to make co-occurring diagnoses or change the diagnosis as the case study evolves or as the client progresses through treatment. Both exams are multiple choice. The NCE, I can't remember if they were true or false questions, but I do know the majority, what I remember, was multiple choice. And let's see, and both tests, you have the option of taking them in person or online. I took the NCE online, and I will most likely try to take this other exam online just because I prefer not having to leave the house if I don't have to. Okay, so the next thing that I'm gonna do is do a couple practice questions. I'll put the questions somewhere around here, and I'll also put the link to this study guide. I did have to buy it, so I can't give it out for free because it's not mine to give out, but it's the Hellwig study guide that I mentioned in one of my other videos. And like I said, the practice tests in this study guide are very similar to the actual exam. I personally, I feel like some of the questions were these questions. They were just worded a little bit differently. So yeah, I didn't really use the actual study guide. I bought it just for the practice tests, and it worked out fine for me. It was pretty cheap. I don't remember exactly how much it was, but I don't think it was more than $20. And there's 2 practice tests in this study guide. There's a practice test for the NCE and a practice test for the CPCE. For my program, I didn't have to take the CPCE, so I just used that as an additional kind of study tool to make sure that I was retaining everything that I was studying. Okay, so I'll try to pick a few questions that might be like in the different categories. I'm not really gonna spend too much time like explaining why the answers are what they are. But if you have questions about any of the answers, then you can leave them in the comments and I will try to answer them the best that I can. Okay, so I'll start with a question that has to do with like the profession and ethics. And the question is, which of the following captures the essence of informed consent? A, having members sign a contract before joining a group. B, telling members in some detail about the nature and purpose of the group. C, having members decide upon all activities of the group. Or D, making sure that groups will always be composed of voluntary members. So if you want to pause it before I give the answer, then you can do that. So the correct answer is B, telling members in some detail about the nature and purpose of the group. So for answering the questions, I kind of use like basic test taking strategies. So process of elimination, marking out the 2 that I feel like are completely off or don't really have a whole lot to do with the topic of the question, and then narrowing it down between the last 2 choices. So the question is, on a college campus, a group of students of color have been protesting their treatment, alluding to harassing comments by whites and what they believe to be discrimination in the grading system by their professors. 11 of these students have come to the campus counseling center and want to begin a group experience to arrive at some answers and find solutions. The most appropriate theoretical orientation of the counselor assigned to lead the group is A, behavioral, B, psychoanalytic, G, gestalt, or D, person-centered. And this is when you really have to know your theorists, what the different modalities are and what is believed like within those theories or treatment modalities. So for this one, the answer is A, behavioral. And if you want like explanations for these questions, like I linked before some of Dr. Pam Turner's videos. She used some of the questions from this study guide in one of her videos. So I will try to find that and link it in there because she does kind of go through why each answer is what it is. And since I'm not doing that, I will link that video. Okay, so this one has to do with career counseling. So a 45-year-old woman is returning to the labor market after an absence of nearly 20 years. She does not know what work she should apply for because she claims she has no skills. Besides dealing with self-concept and confidence issues, the career counselor will attempt to help the woman identify A, obsolescence factors, B, empty nest issues, C, a mentor, or D, transferable skills. So same thing, figure out which 2 you feel like aren't in the ballpark and then narrow it down from that. But again, this is why you really have to know some of those key terms because that's what they're giving you on the exam. And for this one, the answer is D, transferable skills. Okay, so the next one I will do has to do with group counseling. So the question is, Corey, and Corey identified 5 stages that groups go through. The first stage is highly leader-oriented and includes group formation and planning. Which stage follows this one? So again, knowing what these theorists believe, whether it's related to family counseling, individual counseling, group counseling is very important. And for this one, the answer is C. And I found like when I was studying things in a specific order, it was best for me to just memorize them. So that way I could just recall it very easily if I needed to. Okay, so I'll do one that is related to like social issues, because there are also questions related to that on the exam. So the question is, in general, women earn about 82% of what men earn for a variety of reasons, including their entry/re-entry pattern in the labor market, discrimination, and because the types of jobs most of them hold pay less. Which of the following statements is most accurate? Okay. The choices are A, the glass ceiling is more of a barrier now than in the past. B, the percentage of the labor market composed of women continues to increase dramatically. C, there are fewer women than men in service-related occupations. Or D, in terms of income, younger women compare more favorably with younger men than older women compared to older men. Okay, so the answer is D. This one, when I took the practice test, and I retook the test like multiple times, I got this one wrong a couple of times. So understanding what social issues might be relevant for when you're taking the test is also helpful. I didn't spend a whole lot of time reviewing those like specific social issues because I feel like that's very broad. There are a lot of social issues in the world. So for me to try to pick out which ones would be on the exam, that was a lot for me. So I chose not to do that, which might have been one of the reasons why I got that question wrong a couple of times when taking the practice test. There are a lot of questions like this on the exam. Okay, so the question is, for each of 8 stages, Erikson believed that a balance between the polarities was typically the outcome. For example, in his stage of autonomy versus shame and doubt, self-control is fostered. Conflict between autonomy versus shame and doubt may lead to hostile or benign expectations. This Erikson stage is equivalent to Freud's A, anal stage, B, phallic stage, C, oral stage, or D, genital stage. Remember what Freud's stages are, and it tells you what Erikson's stages are, but the answer is A, the anal stage. So again, memorizing those stages, understanding what happens in those stages is important. So yes, memorizing them, knowing the order, but you also need to know what happens in the stages. Okay, so I'll do another one that has to do with research because there was a question related to this on the exam, at least when I took it. So understanding some of these topics might be helpful. Okay, so the question is, assume you have a normal distribution of raw scores. Which of the following standard score is farthest from the mean? A, t-score equals 30, B, stanine equals 6, C, z equals -2, or D, deviation IQ equals 120. And the answer is C. So even now, if you ask me to answer this question, I wouldn't get the answer right. I don't know how to find a lot of those numbers. But if you feel like it's helpful for you to study those topics, then I would definitely encourage it. Because at least putting a little bit of effort into each area, I think is helpful. So those are kind of some of the questions in the study guide, and I feel like they were very similar to the questions on the exam. So understanding terms, stages of development, what different theorists believe, being able to differentiate between what Gestalt or a behaviorist might do in treatment. Understanding the differences is important. So if there are any questions related to the questions that I shared from the study guide, leave them in the comments and I'll try to answer them if I can. But I'll also, like I said, link Dr. Pam's video, so that way if you want to see her going through the exam or the practice test, you can, because she also used questions from different study guides and different practice tests. I only bought one practice test because I didn't want to spend a whole bunch of money on these study materials because the test itself is kind of expensive. So, I only bought one. But she uses questions from the different exams. And even though her videos are a little bit older, I still found them to be helpful when I was taking the exam this year in 2022. So that is all that I have for this video, but if you have any other questions related to the exam, leave them in the comments and I will answer them the best that I can. And yeah, for now, that is all that I have, and I will see you guys next time.